This is Red Ice Radio, a beacon of sanity from Northern Europe. RedIceCreations.com.
Welcome, new and regular listeners. Wherever you are, this is Henrik Palmgren. We are available worldwide over the internet through RedIceCreations.com. We are dedicated to bring you some of the most fascinating, important, and vital information. Things that makes you think and question. Thanks for all the kind and supportive emails also, by the way. We do read them all. We do the best we can to get back to everyone. Josh Reeves, a Dallas, Texas-based researcher, filmmaker, and radio talk show host, is back with us today to discuss his film The Secret Right, Volume 2, that recently came out. Josh was with us last in July 2011 discussing Volume 1. The roots of the conspiracy culture goes deep and indeed into some interesting places, and we'll discuss some of it today. The film investigates individuals and organizations. Among the most notable are the Council for National Policy, the CNP, the John Birch Society, the JBS, and the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, having deep connections with secretive priest-class societies and occult orders. Their creation of the 9/11/Tea Party/Truth/Patriot movements and the conspiracy theory genre at large, and their roots to the New World Order itself. Right, welcome back, Josh. It's great to talk to you again. How have you been since we last talked, Josh?
Oh, I've been great, Henrik. Thanks so much for having me on, and it's a real pleasure to be back with you again. I've been busy working on the various research and stuff for the radio show that I do in the films, and just been continuing to try and find new information. And so it's a real honor to be back with you again. I had a great time last time, so ready to get into it with you here today.
You bet. This is going to be really interesting. The roots of the conspiracy culture are very interesting. They go deep and they go into some very interesting places. We're going to talk about some of this today. This is things that are included in your new film, the latest release from the Global Reality. It's called The Secret Right, Volume 2. And of course, last time we talked about the first film and some of the other, overarching theories and things that you've been researching and working on. But first of all, I personally think it's not only healthy, but essential to question and to examine our own beliefs and where the information that has shaped those beliefs come from. Things that have, we've accepted as truths should be looked at again and re-examined to see if we're on the right track. And I'm personally a strong believer in highlighting the other side. Other sides of the issue. That includes not only the other sides of the mainstream, but also the other side of the alternatives as well. And, when many are looking in one way, when one subject or one idea is getting a lot of focus, it's essential to look in another direction or to look behind even to see what's going on and question why and how so many people ended up to focus on the same thing or believing something very, very similar. So the idea here is that, obviously disagreements and debates are essential to finding answers. And this question, Josh, about controlled opposition is something we're going to get into here as well. We can see this with most popular movements, I think, in one sense. Grassroots movements are taken over at a very early stage, or they might even actually be started by the very organizations that the groups supposedly are against. It's a very clever tactics. But first of all, Josh, great job on the new film. I got a copy. Many thanks for sending it. So, good work on that, Josh.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I was happy to send it to you. But yeah, that's absolutely true what you said there, and that was, I guess, for me, and the biggest thing, and that was a question that I have had a lot through the years, I guess, since I started researching this stuff in 2007, and that was, is it that it was co-opted later on, or was it that it was created very, very from the very beginning by these people, the power structure itself? And so that was something for me. That at first, I guess when I made Volume 1, I didn't have that answer, and I feel now that I more appropriately have that answer, and I think it's detailed in the film. And most certainly, yes, you're correct. I think these things were set up from the very beginning to kind of rope people in and to make people think that they're getting the real actual truth while giving them a false reality, as you mentioned there. And that's been a very effective tool. And I think that's what's great about Red Ice Radio is the fact that regardless of what people believe or don't believe, everything gets a fair shake here. And I think that's one of the most important things we can be doing is allowing people to discern for themselves what is the reality and what isn't, instead of it being prepackaged for us, as you mentioned, not only at the mainstream news level, but at the alternative media level as well.
Yep, that's right. And I think your film is something that everybody should take a look at that are into conspiracies and, as an effort and a way to try to balance their viewpoint and to question their, reality tunnel, as Robert Anton Wilson would say, I guess. All of this is, after all,
right.
I believe, subjective, and we want to create our own reality and not live in somebody else's reality tunnel, right, Josh?
Absolutely, and that's the whole thing that I found, because when I first got involved in this stuff in 2007 on the radio and whatnot, I'd been involved for years before that, but I was very much a mainline, truther and an Alex Jones fan and all that stuff, and very much, mainline. And then just the first week I started doing radio, synchronistically, I was interviewing Peter Dale Scott, and he mentioned this group, the CMP, and just from there, I went on researching, and I immediately started finding all these connections. So, for me, it was one of those things where I didn't go looking for this. It fell in my lap. And when the information fell in my lap, I had a choice. I could either ignore it and stay in that paradigm, or I felt like I was doing this for the truth, and that's what I wanted. And so I was willing to take that leap. And yeah, it was scary and not, not a very, comforting or happy thing to go through, because you're going through this thing where all of the people that you kind of built up as your heroes and the people that wanted you wanted you to get involved in this stuff and got you involved in this are now possibly a part of the very conspiracy that you've been fighting against. So yes, it's been one of those things where it's difficult, and it is difficult to sort of get into this stuff emotionally. But once you get into it and figure out, oh, wait a minute, there actually is something here to this. Then you have time to go through that period of process of realizing that there is definitely more to reality than what is ever on the surface.
That's right. We're going to talk about some of these connections about this as well, what you found and so forth, and the roots, again, as I mentioned, of the conspiracy culture. But first of all, though, you open the movie with an excellent clip from, I think it's from MSNBC, exposing the Blackwater scandal, basically, some of the ties to the Knights of Malta. And they did a really good job, actually, in that clip, to kind of nailing and condensing the whole story, the unfoldment. What do you make of it?
Well, that clip, to me, what was interesting the most about that clip is the fact that in The Secret Volume 1, one of the things I mentioned in that film is that during the 2 years that I was making that film, we had searched literally high and low everywhere, looking for clips on the internet and looking for also clips in news archives, past news archives, because a lot of the old footage I get in those films, Henrik, we buy those and purchase that footage from the news archives. So it's very rare and hard to find footage, but we could never find anything relating to the Council for National Policy. And then literally within just a few months after that film coming out, we have this, like you mentioned, this clip on MSNBC. And what was startling to me is that there's little things in there that Keith Olbermann drops in that clip, where he talks about the call signs of the Blackwater transport things being, the Templar 1 and the Crusader 2,
yeah,
and all this. And he mentions a couple of people being CMP members and Paul Bremer and being Knights of Malta and all this stuff. Well, it was interesting because I had never come across a lot of that information. And there's somebody in there he mentions being a CMP member. That was another one where I was like, okay, I'd never come across that. So it seemed very interesting to me that they were letting a lot of information out of the bag in that clip that was previously unavailable. And it made me kind of question the reasoning behind it. But I think that the reason is because it really took a shift as soon as we went from having a Republican president in this country with George Bush to having Barack Obama. So it seemed that they were willing to take a little bit of the ammo to use against, the right wing at that time. But again, I've sent Secret Volume 1 and 2 out to a lot of these news outlets, and you would think that if they were really wanting to expose the right wing, as the left wing media here in this country claims they want to, they'd be all over a film like this. But of course they haven't been, because no, they don't want to, because it exposes their side as well.
Well, exactly. This is what I'm getting out of it as well. What we're talking about here is an issue that is about controlling and subjugating the human mind and keeping the herd in the pen, so to speak. And you do this by offering them the controlled opposition and the opposition. You control the whole game, the whole chessboard, and you put your players down there, and then you let the people rally behind the various groups that you control. So one thing that's very accurate in all this, I think the analysis that comes out from the alternative movement, a lot of that too, is that we have a very, very controlled structure of left and right paradigm in that sense. And if we're stuck in that, then we're definitely stuck in that sense. But there's also then a third option in some cases, or maybe fourth and fifth, what have you, that's being offered, I guess. But that doesn't mean that that's not either part of the same control mechanism, Josh.
Absolutely, and that's really what this group, the Council for National Policy, this is really the purpose that it serves here in the United States, and they also have members that are outside of the United States as well. There's members of the Rothschild family that are members of the Council for National Policy. You have Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada, who's a member as well. These things reach far beyond the borders of the United States. But what they seem to do in these meetings, Henrik, from what we can gather, is that this is the place, and this is why they have so much secrecy surrounding it, why they don't want people to know who's there and where they're meeting and everything else, is because you have exactly that under one roof. You'll have we have here in the United States, we have like you said, the left wing, right wing, but within the right wing faction, you have 5 or 6 different or 8, 10 different factions. You've got Tea Partiers, and you've got paleo conservatives. You've got, with the traditional libertarians. I mean, you've got all these subsections, and essentially what the Council for National Policy meetings allow them to do is to be able to coordinate all of these different groups under one agenda, under one roof, so that each one of these specific groups has their marching orders and knows how to execute the operation. And so that's, to me, I think why there is so much secrecy and no media allowed in these conferences, is because, a glimpse inside of one of these things would be a glimpse inside the divisionary structure and style of party politics.
That's right. All the work you do is not all the work, but much of the work that you do is about the concept that all roads lead to Rome, basically. The Vatican, we can talk about the Jesuits and the Knights of Malta, and this is something I want to, get into a little bit later here. But what if we just for a moment shift over to the root of the conspiracy culture and what that might been? You detail a very interesting presentation, lecture, whatever you want to call it, by a Robert Welch, founder, as far as I know, of the JBS. Well, I'll let you mention who this guy is and why some of his stuff is important in your view.
Okay, absolutely. Robert Welch actually was, what's interesting, he's a very interesting character because he's not really one of those people that you would consider to be, kind of a ringleader or any sort of, person who's up to anything sinister. I mean, this guy was a candy maker and a candy magnate here in the United States. And at that time, Nelson Rockefeller was getting very much involved in politics in the United States. And he was really looking to start a group that would encompass, traditional right-wing values and be a figurehead for that. And Robert Welch at that time was getting ready to sell his candy company. And Nelson Rockefeller said, "Look, I'll make you a deal. I'll buy your candy company. I'll buy it for 10 times what it's worth because I've got the money to do that. But you got to do me a favor in exchange. I'm starting this group, the John Birch Society, and I want you to head this group up and, do that with some of the money from this candy sales thing that I'm doing." So that's what ended up happening. And Welch is also said to be a 32nd degree Freemason, which is very interesting because normally you don't see these the Freemasons really hubbing it up much with the Catholics, but we're starting to see those connections, and especially within the CNP, we see it a lot. But Welch had begun. He started speaking about the New World Order and some of these various things. But in the 60s, in the mid 60s, right after the time of the Kennedy assassination, he started talking about the Illuminati. He started saying that he believed there was more to the story than just communism, which had predominantly been the story up until that point. And it was just interesting. As soon as he started talking about these things, we started to see a person that be implanted in the John Birch Society to kind of keep tabs and keep the conversation going back towards the fence where they wanted it to be. And that was when we saw John McManus come into the fold. And John McManus, of course, was Jesuit trained. And he was, I had many times before, I think before the volume 2 was out, Henrik, I had made the misnomer on my show and in my films. I'd like to try and correct that here too, that all the heads of the John Birch Society had been Jesuit trained. But Coincidentally enough, on the research, the only one who actually had been Jesuit trained was John McManus, and he's been there since just a few years after the Kennedy assassination. He's been a guest on the Alex Jones Show. This is the guy who I've really fingered as being the force that made sure that, okay, we're going to talk about this conspiracy and this, that, and the other, but we're going to keep it corralled and right towards the way we want it to be.
Right. How have you been able to confirm Robert Welch Freemasonry connection? It's been really difficult for me anyway to try to. I've read various things about it, and it seems to be not 100% definitive. Are you certain that he was a Mason?
You know what? I'm trying to look for that. I think I can't remember exactly where I got that information from. I want to say that the source of that information originally to me came through an interview that is just no longer available that I had done. I hadn't even been on air maybe 5 or 6 months. I think this was like January or so of 2008. I had done an interview with the late Eustace Mullins on my show, and Eustace Mullins, I had asked him about this, and he talked a little bit about personally knowing Robert Welch and being in the John Birch Society at that time, and being good friends with Robert Welch, and him admitting that to him. And then later, Eustace Mullins saying, that he had found out about the Rockefeller connection and didn't want to be involved in that anymore. But then, just about a year or so ago, after Eustace Mullins had died, there's a video clip that had come up on YouTube where Eustace Mullins is describing being friends with the Hunt family and staying at their house, and he has a lot of connections to Willis Carto, who's also been connected to some of these white supremacist groups and Nazis and whatnot. So whether or not that information is credible, I don't really know for sure, but I think that if people could just go and do a search, maybe see what they come up with on that, we could find out for sure. But again, I don't really have any concrete thing to really point people to, but I was just kind of going on that from what Eustace Mullins had said on my show. Because
that is, if that's the case, then because that's very interesting, because that really upsets the normal kind of conditioned idea you have about Masonry, I guess, in one sense. Again, it doesn't mean that everybody on the outside of these organizations have a full understanding of the mechanisms of what goes on in there and stuff, and even if just a membership or even a high rank within Freemasonry automatically means that they have a certain viewpoint or not allowed or are encouraged to allow to talk about certain things. But what was interesting to me is that Robert Welch talks negatively about, the French Revolution, for instance, and the cult of reason, when, from my perspective, all of that stuff that was going on around that time with the Enlightenment had a Masonic origin in one sense. So it's like, why would he talk negatively about that? How is this puzzle, how does it fall together? It's a very complex picture. That's what I'm getting at in a sense.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's what's so fascinating about that clip. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's because he is saying those things that he's talking negatively about all seem to be, things that Freemasons were involved in. So yeah, that makes it even more fascinating. But what's even more interesting to me with the whole connection to Freemasonry and the CMP and this stuff is the fact that Tim LaHaye, who started the group, who absolutely is a Freemason, that's absolutely verifiable. In fact, some of his books, The Crown and the Cross, he uses a lot of Masonic symbology there. But as I mentioned earlier, historically, they've always kind of put out this front, I think, to us that Freemasonry and the Catholic Church and all this stuff have been opposing forces it appears they've been actually working hand in glove. And the fact that Tim LaHaye starting this group, who has come out in the media and been staunchly anti-Catholic and said very negative, bad things about Catholics, and meanwhile being a Freemason, but yet he starts one of the most powerful right-wing groups and takes money directly from a Catholic Knights of Malta family, the Hunt family here in Dallas, and starts his group with money from that, and ends up having all these people from Opus Dei and various other the Knights of Malta and the Jesuits involved in his group. So I think we see right there that's a classic example of, yes, these people may fall into their own individual groups. You may have some people over here that are Freemasons. You may have some people over here that are Knights of Malta. And yes, on the surface, it may appear that those groups would never commingle, but I think it really speaks for a much larger agenda and the importance of that when you see these various factions that normally don't cooperate together, being together under one roof and executing a lot of this New World Order type of ideologies upon people.
That's right. The higher up we climb in the hierarchy of these secret societies and occult orders, it seems that they begin to commingle, and it's almost like at a certain point there something else happens. Another maybe set of initiations, if you will, takes place into a different kind of rite that we, from our perspective, don't even know the name of, and another agenda is there, So it's very difficult, again, just back to that point, to decode this, and this automatic switch that happens in most people's mind just because they hear that someone is a Mason or a Jesuit or a Zionist even, that this automatically means a set of preset principles. I think that's erroneous, Josh, from our point of view.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, that's kind of the thing that has been the underlying sort of theme for my research and all my work over the past 4 or 5 years, and that has been that you've got to understand that no matter how much you think you know or how long you've been researching this stuff, there are so many things that none of us know because they just haven't been outed yet. They just haven't been made available yet, that it's important to keep digging because, as you mentioned, there are groups and rites and rituals and even people involved in all of this whose names we will never know that are very much involved and very much there. And so, that's the standpoint that I was coming from really when I first started on air, was that I thought I knew it all. I thought I knew everything there was to know. And
right.
then, this information really showed me how much I don't know, and it does continue to do that.
Well, that's great. That's what it's all about in that sense, just the sense of discovery and digging deeper into a lot of the mysteries that are surrounding us and our world, basically. Why don't we just briefly talk about, because if there is initiation or an initial point here, I guess we could say, that starts up kind of the conspiracy movement, and it has its roots, at least partially then, in the JBS, the John Birch Society. Can you just tell us a little bit what that is for those who don't know, and also tell us a bit about this potential idea that they might have started out maybe with good intentions but co-opted along the way? What do you think about that?
Well, the John Birch Society, they what's interesting about the group, they originally started as they got their name from John Birch, who was the American military soldier who was killed by Chinese communists, and they had started this group to sort of be a group for anti-communism. This was the heart of the McCarthy era in the United States, where everybody was being labeled a communist, and the communists were under everybody's bed. And I think it's interesting because they sort of transferred that now in the modern day truth movement conspiracy culture, which very much has the John Birch Society involved in it to this day. And they sort of transferred that McCarthyism into a new neo-McCarthyism that I'm calling it now, with sort of the New World Order stuff, where it used to be everybody's a communist, and everybody's communists are hiding under your bed. Now it seems that anybody and everybody is just labeled New World Order, regardless of their affiliations, kind of willy-nilly. So I find that very interesting. But with the origins of the John Birch Society, we started to see a lot of things that, it did seem that there were people in that were kind of involved with being, just people standing up for freedom. But as soon as Robert Welch started taking that angle of wanting to look deeper, because I think it's an inherent natural thing, and a lot of the people in the John Birch Society at first, I think, were kind of looking for the truth in the way that many of us are now, and they were searching for this. And it does seem that there was a point where Robert Welch really, he didn't just become a figurehead and somebody who was implanted there to run the group. He actually seemed like he was an actual researcher, and so when he started coming out and talking about the Illuminati and saying there were more power people involved in this than just the communists, it did seem that started to become a problem. And I just found it fascinating that we had really the roots of the conspiracy culture starting just weeks after the Kennedy assassination on November 22nd, 1964, when you had Revelo Oliver, which is very interesting because his first name's is his last name backwards, Revelo Oliver. I mean, who operates like that from a palindrome? You know, I mean, that just seems very interesting. But he had put out this publication in the John Birch Society magazine that was called Marksmanship in Dallas, and it was this what is considered to be the first, real conspiracy theory type of thing that was being spun. And he told this story of, Oswald being a communist and it being a communist plot. And a lot of people for a long time believed that was the conspiracy. And there they were, right there at the very beginning of that, putting out that information. Of course, Revelo Oliver went on to form the National Alliance with William Luther Pierce, who wrote the Turner Diaries. That's been a major staple in a lot of the militia and sort of the right wing extremist type of literature for years and years and years. And so there he goes with him, and that's there are a lot of people within the Patriot Movement, Truth Movement today who still believe in those white supremacist ideologies, and to find that the roots of that had its foundations in the beginnings of the conspiracy culture and the beginnings of disinformation with the claims of who was really behind the Kennedy assassination was just a fascinating thing. And of course, another piece of information that I had found during the course of this research that I was never aware of was this guy, John Russolo, who had, on behalf of the FBI, John Russolo, Harry Dean, who had infiltrated the John Birch Society in 1962 on behalf of the FBI. And, this guy was in there in the late 50s and late 60s. He was hearing all kinds of talk of them saying, that they were going to kill Kennedy and they were going to kill Kennedy in Dallas. He had very specific information from, Republican Congressman John Russolo, who was, a John Birch Society member at that time, former Army General Edwin A. Walker in Dallas at that time. And, he had recordings, tape recordings. His books, Harry Dean's books are very, very hard to find now. I've seen a few on Amazon and they run in the couple of $100 because, they just suppressed this information because he specifically names in that book John Birch Society members being directly, not just, talking about it, but being directly involved in the Kennedy assassination. And to see how that information on Harry Dean has been, really, it's almost impossible to find on the internet as well. I've gone and looked for some of his books and have found a few of them, but it just seems that there's been a massive campaign to keep Harry Dean's information out of the truth and conspiracy culture because, again, he fingers single-handedly the John Birch Society in there. When you look at things like Alex Jones getting his start from family members and stuff like that, being in the John Birch Society, when you look at how many people have been involved with this group through the years, it just really, really starts to paint a picture of controlled opposition and of gatekeeping.
That's right. It's such you do a really interesting portion, obviously, on the JFK and RFK assassinations as well in the film, but it's such a mess, though, this whole story. Obviously, just people like Oswald and Clay Shaw and all the others. Were they mind controlled? Are they joining socialist organizations to put focus on them? We have the ideas of double agents, triple agents, and they themselves at this point might not be aware of who they're working for or who they're joining to put focus on this group or that group. It's an incredible mess, isn't it? Do they even themselves know what they're doing anymore? What do you think?
Well, I think I think that may be on the surface. It may appear that way that that these guys are running around like chickens with their heads cut off and they don't know they're flipping sides, they don't know who's with who. But I think that when you really get down to it, there becomes a more direct, clear line of who these guys are working, especially when you look at the fact, like you mentioned, Clay Shaw, David Ferrie, all these guys who were involved at the highest levels with the Kennedy assassination. All had connections back to the Knights of Malta, as well as all of the CIA, the big sacred cows at the CIA that Kennedy had fired, and when he had threatened to splinter the CIA into a million pieces. All these guys were all Knights of Malta as well, and he fired every single one of them. So it does sort of on the surface appear that there is a big mess, and it is. But really, when you get down to the bottom of it, it appears that it's been very clear for a long time who's been really behind these things, But the cognitive dissonance and the confusion and the thing that you're talking about where, you don't know who's involved in what has come as a direct result of these entities like the John Birch Society and other alleged truth tellers who have muddled the picture for us by giving us conflicting information and not giving us the real truth and showing us all the connections. So it's caused a confusion where, people just say, oh, well, I don't know who's involved with what and whatever, and I don't care, and it's too complicated. And so they just leave it behind and then never look any farther into it. And I think that's been something that has been done with intent to get people thrown off the trail.
I think you're right there, and of course we want to have such a clear picture as possible to be understand the game, and therefore obviously the game as I think the conspirators sees it is beneficial to muddy the water in that sense. My point of view has always been to question if everything is intentional and if everyone who is part of it are 100% in the know, I guess, because the compartmentalization of this is another agenda. I mean, again, if we go back to groups like the JBS, and let's say in the beginning, then you would have a lot of people, I think, that are well-meaning in one sense, that have a genuine, let's say, fear about the detrimental effects of socialism and communism, that are sucked into these groups, and then hence they're working for an agenda which at the end of the day they don't really know what that is. So that's part of it. Absolutely. Too. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I saw that firsthand back in I guess it was 2008. I think it was when it was 2008, and there was a conference here in the Dallas area where I live, and it was called the Freedom 21 Conference, and it's on the lineup that it was going to have. I thought at first it was a CMP meeting, so of course I had to go and cover this thing because they had a lot of these people there, and it was called Freedom 21. You had Phyllis Schlafly there, you had Larry Pratt from Gun Owners of America there, Ron Paul, all these different people. And so I went to this conference, and what I had found during that conference is that, I went in with the attitude first and everything. I was going to go in there, all guns blazing, and I was going to have my camera rolling, and I was going to get in people's faces, and you need to answer for this, blah, blah, blah. But I realized that really wasn't an effective way to do it, and I could probably get a lot farther if I just went in there, kind of very politely and been a part of the scene and talked to people. And I ended up getting footage of Phyllis Schlafly for the Secret Right Volume 1, and also footage of Larry Pratt in there in the Secret Right Volume 1 that were both taken at that conference. And what I found was that absolutely, I mean, there were people there who seemed to be, on the same page as you and I or anybody else, Henrik. There were people in there that were about, the issues, and they were about freedom. And you saw, a lot of the stuff they were talking about. I mean, in fact, all the stuff they were talking about, I was, on board with. They had somebody from the John Birch Society there. That was interesting. He was speaking about how all the Rockefellers are Gaia worshipers, and how the Rockefellers are bad and all this stuff. And I was just sitting there laughing, going, man, you're a John Birch Society member. Your group was set up by the Rockefellers. But that guy probably didn't know that.
Right.
He probably had no idea, as you're saying.
Right.
He has no idea that even happened. So, yes, I think that's why it's important that everybody look into the information I'm presenting in the Secret Right Volume 1 and 2 and on the radio show and stuff, because there most certainly are people out there who are having their good names tarnished by the fact that they are allowing themselves to be associated with some of these groups without knowing the whole picture. And how could you? Because, they're not allowing this stuff to be out there. So I think that's one of the things that I hope to achieve with this film, is that maybe this will bring some of those people that have kind of been going along with this stuff and not knowing what they've been connected to, and get them to re-examine their affiliations.
That's right. It's a different thing to listen to different sides and expose different things in order to try to get closer to an answer. I think that the danger, if we can call it that, is when you begin the aligning of yourself, or again, you're joining a particular group, with the well intentions. You think, this is the right thing. Let's go. But, as we know, as we've seen with, everything from Anonymous to, the whole, Occupy movement, it's being, when something grows large enough at a certain point, it's like, okay, let's give up on this. That's my attitude, kind of thing, because it's like, it's infiltrated, it's taken over, and now it's going to be used for something negative at the end. It's very unfortunate, but it's kind of a laziness, actually, in one sense. I feel that people are, they go in and they kind of align themselves to a group or to a specific cause or agenda, and it's comforting, it's easy to be there, and everybody here gets along, and it's a lot of things going on behind the psychology of why you would want to do that, or why people would want to do that. But I guess what I'm saying is that advocating the joining of groups and all that is something I've always personally kind of stayed away from, just because of that potential danger in there, Josh.
Well, absolutely. And it does appear that a lot of these groups, I mean, I look at it like this. If you wanted to control something and you wanted to control the flow of information, the easiest way to do that would be to have, and this is kind of what they do in the Council for National Policy, is they'll have, various different individuals who will handle different elements and aspects of the operation. You'll have one person who specifically talks about, fluoride in the water. You'll have one person who specifically talks about 9/11 or whatever have you. And, it's the reason I think that they do that, Henrik, is because, if let's just say that you're someone who you just woke up to the conspiracy of 9/11, let's just say that, and you have no idea anything about Alex Jones or a 9/11 Truth Movement or any of that stuff at all, and so you find out, you get some information, you find out 9/11 wasn't what they told you it was, and then you're angry and you want to do something. So you decide that you want to start a group or something else to find out the truth about 9/11. Well, when you go and start getting ready to start your group, you start looking, you find out that, oh, wait a minute, there's already, tons of groups and tons of people out there talking about this. So, it's much easier to go and join a group that's already existing if there's already like-minded people allegedly talking about that than it is to do something on your own. And I think that's what they count on. And I think that that's how they've gotten a lot of people connected to their ideologies. And as you mentioned, people kind of going with these groups without thinking for themselves is because, this information's already so overwhelming and scary sometimes that if you find what appears to be like-minded people who are into this stuff as well, you almost immediately want to latch onto that, to feel like you have people who are like you and think the same way. And I think that they totally have capitalized on that and have essentially set these groups up preemptively to get people roped into them. So, from the very onset, they have no idea that they're following a false ideology.
That's right. And at the end of the day, too, we have the creation of divisions and infights, and it's kind of just like religion at the end, like fights between partisans and Catholics. It divides people, and it's just a big mess that happens of all of this stuff. But if we, for a moment, Josh, focus over, we'll go back. I wanted to briefly talk a little bit about William F. Buckley. He seems to be the guy who took over after Robert Welch, if I'm not mistaken, and he has an interesting character. He died a while back too, a year or two ago, I think, maybe more.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that always seemed to pop up. And what had happened there was that William F. Buckley had started to right as soon as they began talking about the Illuminati and some of this various deeper stuff. He had renounced the John Birch Society in public because Robert Welch had made claims about Eisenhower being a communist. And we started at that moment to see this, what I believe to this day to be phony division and a sort of a split that was caused intentionally to get people further divided and to cause this schism within conservative politics at that time, because you did have people who, didn't really care what William F. Buckley said and continued to go on with the John Birch Society, even though it really hurt their numbers. And you had people that went to the William F. Buckley end of it, in his magazine and all that stuff, and sort of became the, what the right-wing party was established and known as. And that's really where you started to see the John Birch Society and the conspiracy theorists and stuff, starting to be relegated to a fringe. Of course, you look at William F. Buckley's connections. I mean, my goodness, Knights of Malta, Skull and Bones. I mean, all the way across the board with this guy. And, CFR, it's just amazing. Yeah, CFR as well. It's just amazing how many different, areas that his name popped up in during the course of the research. But, he definitely absolutely was really one of the earliest characters that I think was executing this operation on behalf of the Central Intelligence Agency to cause these various factions within right-wing politics and party politics itself to spring up, because shortly after that, we started to see this echoed within the Republican Party here in the United States. We started to see, right around the time when Nixon was running for president, you had Nixon, and then you had Barry Goldwater coming out. And Barry Goldwater was really, the figurehead for right-wing John Birch Society and sort of the extremist stuff at that time. And before that, we didn't see that. And we started to see multiple factions within the right-wing party, which later then led in the 1980s to the formation of the Council for National Policy with Tim LaHaye. And that was really the key essence that I've traced back to this group, is the fact that, when you look at all of the groups that have funded and founded any of the think tanks, various think tanks throughout the world, from the Royal Institute of International Affairs to the CFR to the CMP, it all goes back to the Fabian Socialist Societies. And this was really what the Council for National Policy and the formation of this was about, to ensure that no matter who you voted for on left or right of the political spectrum, you were going to be making a vote for socialism. And I think that's indeed what they've done.
That's a really interesting point, and that really puts things into a different perspective as well. What do you make of the Christian element in all of this? And maybe briefly we can touch upon Zionism later too. But let's begin with the Christian idea that we have, as detailed in that clip that you have in the beginning, that shows, the religiosity, if you will, of George W. Bush. It shows that, he's a believer in God, and this is another crusade with the Iraq War. We have the connections to, Blackwater and Knights of Malta, in there. What is all of that about? Do you believe that there's a true essence in that, and they truly are convicted of this, or is George W. Bush also a Fabian that is just posing as a fake kind of Christian? What do you think?
Well, I think I think with George, with the case of the Bushes, you've got something a lot deeper there, because you've got look, you can trace the Bush family bloodline all the way back to Ramses II in Egypt if you dig deep enough. I mean, these guys connect all the way back to the pharaohs with these bloodlines, and so I think that, and this is some of the stuff that is come as a result of reading some of the Sumerian texts and some of the works of Zecharia Sitchin and others that I've read, and you start to see this picture painted to where the reason why these biblical lands have been so important and why there's been this crusade going on is because these supposedly we were going to see the return of in the Sumerian text, Nibiru is referred to as a planet, but if you read closely, it's actually referred to as Marduk. And so this return of Nibiru is actually the return of the supremacy of Marduk, and these bloodlines. And Marduk had declared his rulers to be the controllers of these various lands. And it just happens to be all these biblical lands where supposedly these landing places, these landing pads have been located in Jerusalem and Sinai and all the rest of this, and whoever controls these lands in the time of his return is going to be the rulers. And so it appears that all of this genocide in the Middle East and all of this conquest and things like invading the Baghdad Museum for antiquities has all been a part of trying to reclaim this land that these bloodline people that are in charge today believe to be theirs and believe that they have to have control over because of some future coming events. And I believe that this is what the priest class and the Jesuit order and the Catholic Church and the rest of this has been hiding and has been keeping, hidden and hidden away from us, is this fact that all of this is being done for a very old ideology that is now coming to fruition with the control of those areas.
Now, there are some, Josh, that claim that this is a ruse as well, and point to for instance, one of the connections between Sitchin and the fact that he had an office in Rockefeller Plaza, some of the interest that is behind his work in that sense, and that they've now created a myth surrounding both the Sumerians. I mean, my point has always been, all right, we have the work of people like Michael Heiser, very interesting stuff that deconstructs some of Zecharia Sitchin's points and shows a different story there. It doesn't take away, though, the stories that are in the rest of the mythological record from other cultures around the planet that have, meetings with the, entities and gods that come from the sky. There's so much there. So it doesn't disqualify the theory, of course. But what about the creation of a myth surrounding, E.T. or aliens, or the fact that humans are the slaves of another race and all that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a possibility, and that's one of the things I've been looking into lately is that the possibility that some of these things aren't actually coming from outer space, as we've been told, but possibly from inside of the Earth. So there's all kinds of different things in different areas you can go into and look into. But yeah, I think the key thing for me though is that regardless of whether or not any and all that stuff is true, the importance of these bloodlines and the importance of how these bloodlines trace back and who's in charge here, it's just undeniable. And so I think to me, that's one of the key things that I've focused on as far as the idea of the secret right and the CMP is because we do see so many bloodline people involved in this group. Phyllis Schlafly, for instance, is a Merovingian blue blood on both sides of her family. She comes from the Stewart bloodline and the Bruce bloodline.
Right.
And I, at this conference that I mentioned earlier, the Freedom 21 conference, I have never seen anything like this. When she entered the room, they had this luncheon with Phyllis Schlafly, and when she entered the room, everyone in that entire hall stood up and venerated this woman like she was the Queen of England. I didn't get it at the time. I was like, why are they essentially worshiping this woman? And then, of course, when you research her bloodline or the family lineage, you find out why. And I found that very, very interesting, Henrik, that, all of these people simultaneously in this meeting seemed to be aware of that. They seemed to know that she was somehow royal and special and the rest of it because they were just venerating her and standing up and standing ovations, just the way that they were treating her. So that's one of those things for me where I sort of gauge what I believe based on the things that I've seen and the things that I've experienced. So there's no question that these people, for whatever reason, whether or not it does have to do with Sumerian stuff or Anunnaki stuff or not, for whatever reason, they do believe they have the divine right to rule.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and that exactly, and that's really what matters at the end of the day is that whether we, from our point of view, believe this or not, or if we obviously very interesting, we can find supporting evidence for this. What the hell is going on? Why do they venerate the bloodline so much, etc. But exactly, they believe in it, and that really what matters. That means that their ideology and theology is going to be driven by this in one way or another. But if we, for a moment, go back to JBS and some of the more obscure information that came out in the beginning. At that point, do you think that the intention was that, let's try to create, if you will, a conspiracy movement, a big, group of human beings that are, led down this path, let's say, as opposed to another one? Because at the beginning, there wasn't really that many voices that heard all of this. I mean, in your film, you refer to, for instance, the records of Myron Fagan, on the Illuminati and stuff, but that wasn't really, it wasn't big sellers, if I put it that way. It's very obscure, a small little faction. Do you think they anticipated it to grow as big as it is, today, Josh?
I think they did, and I think that, around that section of the film where I have the, interview in there with Anthony J. Hilder, he says some very interesting things about the numbers. At the very beginning of that interview, he says, it went from being so many people knowing about the conspiracy at this point to this many people. I don't know where he was deriving those facts and figures from, but I would say just from what he's saying about those facts and figures, that yes, someone did anticipate a growth of this. And from what I found, Henrik, where that came from was, okay, well, but back around up until I think 1945, you weren't even allowed to be a Knight of Malta outside of Rome. And right around the same time that you had the ending of the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services here in the United States, which led to the formation of the Central Intelligence Agency, that was at that moment when they decided that people outside of Rome could be Knights of Malta. So the Catholic Church at that time was looking for a new, essentially, and they were shifting the focus over from Protestantism, which up to that point had been the big boogeyman of the Catholic Church, to switching over to the boogeyman being communism. So they essentially had made all the heads and all the figures, Wild Bill Donovan, William Casey, all these guys who came out of the OSS, who went on to form the CIA, they made all of these guys Knights of Malta so that they could operate with impunity in any country in the world, free of laws or anything else. This is why Henry Kissinger is wanted for war crimes in so many countries and never brought to justice for any of those, because he's operating under the charter of the Knights of Malta. And so that was a huge shift, and I think that's why they started these groups like the Council for National Policy, John Birch Society, and others were more specifically at the beginning, was because they sort of had a, well, again, this is complicated stuff. I think it went back more to the rise of the League of Nations after World War II, and then the dysfunction of the League of Nations, which then led to the United Nations, because the League of Nations was really their first stab at global government. And Carol Quigley and a lot of people had written in their works that they were afraid that people would not be sophisticated enough to understand why there was a need for a global government, and they would rebel against this. And so during that time, it was important for them to start coming out with groups that would sort of label conspirators, communists, people who were working towards an alleged agenda of a one-world communist government to deflect away from the powers that be within the United States and other countries as well that were actually working towards an open world government, but they wanted to make it appear that there were some other, sinister forces that were behind it that were the enemy, so that people didn't know that actually it was the people that were up front talking about the conspiracy that were very much involved in trying to bring this in.
So you have some great clips from a documentary about the Jesuits in your film as well, where a little bit of the Vatican II, the Second Council, is addressed, and there is some questioning there whether things in the Vatican and their agenda has been taken over. As you before, there's this little perception that there's been a fight between Freemasons or Freemasonry and the Vatican. That's always an interesting little aspect there, but there's just so much to it in the way that the Vatican also has been reformed. But do you believe that the agenda of the Jesuits and their army, the Knights of Malta, is pretty much consistent, and that they've managed to stay pretty much intact, or have they been infiltrated to a certain degree as well, Josh? What do you think?
Well, I think that there's so much secrecy surrounding the Jesuit order itself, because, I mean, you have to look into the origins of this group, and when you look into that, you sort of see the origins of the Illuminati and the Los Alumbrados Society, and long before there was the Bavarian Illuminati or Weishaupt or any of that. And it does seem that there's been a consistent theme with the Jesuit order throughout the years of being, the military enforcement arm of the Vatican, meaning, our ideologies will prevail, and we're willing to kill and use an army to do it. And I think that's, when you really historically look at all the different events that have gone on through the years, you start to see this picture where, Jesuits are considered to be the highest education you can get is a Jesuit education. A lot of importance. That's because they have a lot of these teachings that go back and that are hidden to the rest of the world. So, while I think that the Catholic Church itself and the regular white Pope and all that stuff, I think a lot of that is just front dressing, window dressing, just like, any other puppet or figurehead or president or anything else. And, that in smaller numbers at the highest levels of the priests and the society, the general of the society, the Black Pope, you definitely have a lineage where this agenda is passed down. It is kept very pure at the smallest levels, but I think that they have definitely maintained this quest to be able to do things in the name of, religious supremacy and in the name of God, without ever giving anybody specifics on exactly who these gods are, where they came from, and what their real agenda is.
Yeah, it's true. The theology in that sense is very much unchallenged, and they've managed to erode a lot of the other information from around the world, and the Catholic and the Christian agenda is obviously there. Now, of course, if they, on the other hand, have a different set of beliefs and they've given this to the mass of the people, that can be argued as well. It's very interesting. We're going to continue talking more about this, Josh, as we proceed in the second segment. We're going to take a short little break here, but I want to talk more about your website first of all, and obviously how people can pick up a copy of the latest DVD. You have it in Blu-ray as well, and the website there is theglobalreality.com. And right there on the front page, you can just click into the DVD to find out more about that. But Blu-ray as well available and stuff. So that's pretty exciting. HD. It's really well made, by the way. Josh, tell us a bit more about how to get a copy of the documentary.
Well, thank you. You can go to theglobalreality.com. That's my website. And there's a little tab there that says Buy SR2. And you click on that. And, yeah, we have different packages there. You can get a DVD or a Blu-ray. We also have a thing called the Research Pack that's pretty interesting that people can get. You can get those in configurations with DVD and Blu-ray. And what this is, it's a 4.2 gig data disk for your computer. And it's pretty much like a data dump of all of my files for the making of the film, and people can order packages with those, and you'll get extended clips. We have the full. You had mentioned the Georgetown clip there of the Black Pope talking about the New World Order. That actually comes from a full Georgetown University video that's about 45 minutes long, and it's very, very telling if you watch the whole thing. That's included in the research pack. All the pictures and some of the various extended video clips that are unedited are in there as well. So. People have really been responding to that, Henrik. The fact that because I try with my films, I try not to let all the information out in the films themselves. I try to allow people to have room to research this stuff because I think it's very important that people have those aha moments for themselves when they find out this information. And certainly with all of the names in the Secret Right Volume 2, I really suggest people to have a pen and write down all these names that they hear. And go and research these individual names on their own and find out all the more information that's connected to them because there's just so much, it's impossible to put it in the film.
Yeah.
And now that people have been doing that and researching it on their own, I think that the people have found that that's a lot more gratifying and fulfilling to sort of take the reins and responsibility for researching this stuff on your own and not leaving it in the hands of someone else.
That's right. And then you do updates as well, of course, on your radio program. Tell us about that as well briefly, Josh.
Yeah, that's Monday through Friday at midnight Central Standard Time there at the network, and there's also archives and YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, that's how people support us, theglobalreality.com.
Excellent. That's the website. Links up on redaxcreations.com as well. Stay with us, Josh. Really interesting stuff. We'll continue talking more about the film and about the research and about the work. We'll be right back. Second hour together with Josh Reeves. We are talking about the Secret Right Volume 2 and some of the other material, of course, that you can find on his website, theglobalreality.com. We have much more to talk about, much more to address when it comes to some of these both misconceptions and also ideas when it comes to the roots of the conspiracy culture and everything else. I'd like to spend a little time on the more on the Illuminati and the basic idea that we have of the Jesuit connection as well. And the obviously you brought out this point about the Alumbrados. Tell us a little bit about this society and who's behind this and the connection to the Illuminati, Josh.
Well, you had this group appear in Spain that seemed to be operating on some ancient knowledge, and they were seeking to essentially find and teach and learn about this thing called the inner light, or what we know as enlightenment. And so what was interesting about that group is that's where we saw St. Ignatius of Loyola, who went on to form the Jesuits, was involved with this group, and the foundations for the Jesuit order seem to be really rooted in these Alumbrados teachings. And this is where men were being taught that this power that the quote-unquote gods had also existed within every man, so long as we were able to access it through these ancient teachings and these various things that in some cases went back to ancient Kabbalism, went back to ancient things from the roots of culture, from Samaria and Acadia and Babylon, the rest of this stuff. And this seems to be one of the key factors of illuminated teachings that were disseminated throughout various secret society structures. And so when Weishaupt had created his what he called the Illuminati in 1776, it was really not the same as what the Alumbrados had. It was more of an attempt to take these teachings in a watered down fashion and add illuminated or enlightened degrees to the already existing Freemasonic structure. And that's indeed what they did. And so it's just fascinating that St. Ignatius of Loyola, being the really one of the figureheads of bringing out this Alumbrados information and then forming the Jesuit order and that becoming the sort of a military enforcement army. It really speaks volumes, Henry, to the fact that that kind of that Alumbrado structure transferred over to the Jesuits and this secrecy was involved. They want these teachings to be in the hands of a small amount of people, the priests, and of course, this was how it was in the olden times, in the days of Samaria and the older civilizations. We didn't have congressmen and senators and lords and all this stuff. It was the priests, and these priests that had the information kept it restricted and kept it kind of watered down and only allowed certain bits to be put out to the general public. I mean, it's just like in Egypt. They told the slaves the sun was God. Meanwhile, they had their whole pantheon of gods that within the highest levels. And I think that's that's sort of a theme for the entire religious structure to this day. And that has been men who have had access to information that they have not allowed the general public to have and have restricted in a large dose in order to control society and control the world in the way that they see fit. Because, again, if everyone had access to this secret information, you would have no need for a hierarchy, would you? You'd have no need for control. There would be no one to rule over because everyone ostensibly would be equal. And I think that's a very, very, very common theme that we see happen throughout the centuries, is that it always seems that people in general are being relegated to ignorance and being only told parts of the story, only enough to what they feel that they need to know in order to gain control over them.
That's right. I'd like to ask you what you make of, allegedly Adam Weishaupt was Jesuit taught. I don't know if he was specifically became a Jesuit or how deep involved he was in that. That's definitely absolutely there. But then if we look at some of the activities of the order, the Perfectabilists, we had a lot of royalty joining, of course, to some prominent names, yes, like Ferdinand of Brunswick. There's a number of people in there. But it was also it was built on some of the Enlightenment principles, allegedly, and also incorporated into this was then the destabilization of certain monarchy and the current, ruling class at the time. And as far as I've been able to tell, that there's nothing that seems to indicate, at least officially, of course, that they were Satan worshippers or anything like that. This is more of was a political movement. And so it's a lot, so much misconception, of course, about the Illuminati. And granted, I understand that there's an official version and then, of course, an unofficial version as well. But if we just focus a little bit first on the Jesuit aspect here, how influential was this to Weishaupt, and how much of that did he carry with him, do you think?
Well, it seems that from what I've read and what I've researched, that Weishaupt was essentially charged with going and finding the rest of the information that the Templars had when they fled to Scotland to form and later form Freemasonry after the Catholic Church had forbidden the Templars to practice anymore, and they had all that stuff, heresy trials and all that. It seems that Weishaupt was sort of the guy who was sent in to find the rest of the information, and so that it would give the Jesuits more power. And with being the person that was going and finding that, he was sort of the messenger of it and the carrier of that information. And so because he had access to that knowledge that very few other people had access to, other than the highest up people in the Jesuit order at that time that he then transferred the information to, that put Weishaupt in the position to have possibly a lot of power, because he was one of the few people who knew these deeper teachings and these deeper stuff that went back to Solomon's Temple and things of that nature. And so, yes, it put him very much in a position. You're absolutely right. It wasn't about Satan worship or any of this stuff, but what it was about creating a new faction and a new order of individuals. And you're right. It very well could have been a case where it could have been possibly had the intention of being started as something good. But, again, there's this overarching theme throughout history where, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think that that's the case with Weishaupt, where, I think he was trying to set up his own little shop and his own little power structure because of the heaviness of the information that he had in his possession. And so, I think some of these groups went underground and went on and splintered off and to form other groups, and certainly the secret society structure that came to America, that existed in all the universities and was set up on all the universities like Yale, definitely came as a result of the Weishaupt thing. So I think that the intent and purpose behind all that splintering was to water down these original teachings and to still keep the teachings and the fact of, man actually having the inherent power of the gods inside of it, if we only had the knowledge to tap into it, was something they wanted to keep from the general public at large, and also in the hands of a smaller amount of people that may have an opportunity to be able to challenge at that time what may have been perceived as power that was unwanted, like you mentioned, the crown or any of these other power structures. So
right,
absolutely, right. I think that's been really a big key for these people, is keeping any and all of this information or these enlightened teachings out of the hands of people who may challenge them.
That's true, and I mean, if you look at the climate in Europe at the time as well, I definitely understand, much in the same way that there is reason for groups like the Tea Party that props up, or even Jordan Birch, society in the States at the time. I think we need to look at it a little bit from the same point of view here, because the Illuminati at that time, then they had reasons to form, politically speaking, the shitty conditions in Europe, and they wanted to, I think, also then control dissent against the royalty that started to grow in Europe. So I think the rationale was, okay, let's create a group, potentially it's one of the theories, let's create a group that can represent an anti kind of royal approach, and at the same time then attract certain people from royalty itself, and use their power to advance the agenda of the group, of course. But this is a way, again, to create or to control the opposition in one sense, if it's true that the Illuminati really was the creation of the monarchy, and they were seeking to continue their own reign, possibly. This is, again, there's two different sides to the story, of course. I don't know which one you favor, if any of these, Josh, but just, that's an interesting point, I think, that there is a reason politically for why this was created at the time, but the question is, was it controlled opposition, or was it kind of the real deal, I guess? What do you think?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's absolutely an argument that needs to be made, because I don't know for sure, Henrik, I really can't say, but I mean, it'd be hard for any of us to say for sure, but I think absolutely what you're saying is true. There is a precedent for the fact that yes, they wanted to have groups that were a challenge to the crown or the challenge to other power structures, but they also wanted to make sure that those groups were controllable and didn't become a threat to their power structure itself as well. And absolutely, I think that's very much the case in the modern structure with the John Birch Society and the Truth Movement and the rest of this stuff, because you hear people say that they don't believe in left-right politics, or they don't believe in the left-right paradigm, but yet they'll say go and vote for, Ron Paul, or go and vote for this right-winger and go and support this. So, you can kind of see that thing where, okay, well, which one is it? Do you either not believe in left-right politics, or do you want people to support the system? And I think that's been the problem, is that people have been confused and been duped by people who were saying they don't believe in the current political spectrum, but saying, okay, well, in this case, disregard that and go vote and go support this right winger. I think that causes this thing where, regardless of whether or not you go into a ballot box and write Donald Duck's name in on the ballot, you're still verifying to the power structure that their system as it stands is okay with you. You just don't like the people that are running it. Yeah. And I think that sets up a very scary thing, especially with these CMP types, with the Christian Reconstructionists and the people who want to bring in this theocracy and a religious rule throughout the globe, and that is indeed what these people want to do.
It's definitely true. What do you see as the fix, I guess, to that? There is a lot of people out there who are like, as you say, I think they vote for certain people because they see it that it's the best of the choices, although they might not prefer, who they are and so forth. And some to certain people seem like a very good option. But, what do you suggest instead? Non-compliance? How do we can begin to unplug people from the system, from the matrix in a way, Josh?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a hard question to answer,
yeah,
because it's it's very well. It's it's very inducive to the individual themselves. I don't think there's one bulletproof way for each individual to say, this is how you unplug each person from the matrix. I think that everybody, there's so many issues that everybody out there can resonate with at least one of these issues. And I've talked to so many people through the years, Henry, and every person I've talked to has had a different story about how they got into this. Some people got into this stuff through UFOs. Some people got into this stuff through 9/11, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so to me, it really doesn't matter how you come into it, so long as you are, not getting caught up in some of these divide and conquer schemes that are being laid for you. But I really suggest to people, what I suggest is non-compliance in the system, not voting at all, not registering vote, and really trying to not participate in their systems at large and getting that to spread. And there are many people that are doing that now. And I think that that's the biggest signal that you can send these people is that, look, I'm not buying into either one of your phony paradigms now. And I think that's why they have so many different factions within the different parties now, so they can ensure that no matter what, they get the people voting for somebody and participating in this system all over again, so that the vicious cycle just continues and never ends.
That's right. It's really interesting in that sense how people have been played and the willingness of people to go along with it. It's very much a perception, manipulation of the perception that this is all the options that we do have, and in that sense people are not empowered to do things on their own, but they're constantly, again, going back to the Occupy movement, they are, in one sense, Josh, they're looking towards the people that initially have created the problem to offer them a fix, because it's nothing really clear or tangible in one sense of what's, demanded or proposed. And furthermore, if you looking towards the people that have created the problem to begin with, and look towards them for the solution, I think you kind of lost the plot in a way. It's like it doesn't make sense to me at all. So very sad.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's one of the biggest things to try and overcome is the fact that we've been so used to having everybody do our thinking for us, and I run into that problem a lot with people who listen to my show and stuff like that. Sometimes not for the most part, but sometimes I run into this situation where people don't want to do the research and do the homework on their own. They want you to give them all the information there is, and they don't want to have to do the work on their own. And I think that's so dangerous to participate in, because then you're putting your knowledge and what you know in the hands of someone else. And to me, that's what got us in this problem to begin with. So we definitely need more people. That's, as I mentioned in the last hour, that's why I try to get people to look into the information I've talked about in the See Right Volume 1 and Volume 2 for themselves, and to expound on that information and to research each of the individual names and the different groups, because I'm telling you, there's more to this story than I've been able to put in any of these films, and you're doing yourself a huge disservice if you don't research all of this stuff on your own. And I think that's the most important thing, Henry, is taking back and reclaiming for ourselves our own personal knowledge, and again, not putting it into the hands of a teacher or a figurehead or something else. And that sort of system is what they've gotten us accustomed to and used to. And I think a lot of people just fall into that inadvertently without thinking about it, because it's just so natural, because that's the way things have been up to this point. And so, that's really what I stress with my listeners and the people who watch my films, is to please, please, please always do your own research.
Well, it's true. It's very true. I think, and then another side effect you get of this is that people develop, kind of hero characters, I guess, and then another set of consequences to this is that if you then, let's say, or the person that is getting the projection of all this hero stuff onto them in one sense, if they don't go into a certain aspect, or if they've forgot to mention an area, that they're accused of intentionally misleading and things like that. Why didn't you tell me all the things about this or that? When it's like, well, if we've encouraged you to do your own research and look into this, for yourself, this is what should be done. But it's almost like it turns on its head pretty quickly as well. And the people who are looking to a figurehead or a hero in that sense, can equally, snap against them in the next second as well. It's a very weird situation, all of this.
Yeah, it is. It's a difficult thing, because And that's just it's a product of the society and how we were always programmed to believe that the hero is going to come riding in on the white steed to save us all. That's a big problem, I think, in here in the United States, and with the truth movement and stuff with Ron Paul. I think that everybody is, instead of trying to take actions and do things to reclaim their freedom for themselves, they've now pasted and subjected all those hopes onto Ron Paul, who they think is the hero now. And people feel like, oh, well, we just have to support him and get him elected, and then that'll take care of all the issues we have. And that's just not the truth. No person is going to fix any of these problems, and especially not someone who's an elected official within the system itself. It's just a pipe dream to believe that would ever happen.
Yeah, well, exactly. Especially a president. I mean, how much do they really know anyway? It's been speculated within the conspiracy movement for a long time that the president is just a patsy anyway, and is not actually the controlling force behind something. It's committees, it's boards, it's business, corporations, and everything else. So what is this all about all of a sudden?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case, and so people who. As you mentioned, say, well, this person left out this, or you left out this piece of information, or whatever it may be. That reliance on another individual other than ourselves to be the proprietor of our personal truth and our personal knowledge base is just dangerous business. And that's the business that we have as humankind allow ourselves to be in, where we're constantly allowing a third party to dictate to us how much we know. And I think it's time that every single individual out there takes the responsibility of what they know in their own knowledge base into their own hands.
Let's shift area a little bit, and I want to ask you a little bit more about Kashiogi, some of the connections that you brought out in your film pertaining to that really interesting area. Who's this guy, Josh?
Adnan Kashiogi actually is a very, very interesting character, and he supposedly has been connected to every major world event over the past 50 years. And you definitely see his hands in everything from black ops and assassinations to funding. He's really a bag man, so to speak. He's sort of a go-between between big financiers, Zionist financiers, such as Carla Khan and others. And essentially, when the powers that be are going to pull off an operation like Iran-Contra or a 9/11 or anything else, they have to find ways to be able to fund these things and do these things off the book. So they set up front companies, they set up various organizations that appear to be, either selling products or doing something else, and then they have these ideologies around them where they say, okay, you want to look good, or you want to extend your life, or, you want to, have this miracle cream or this miracle product and, to, fight the New World Order or whatever it may be. And then the next thing you know, all this funding is being funneled through these products and then into other sources, which then goes to fund, one of the things that, Adnan Kashiogi allegedly did was provide all the money to the hijackers for 9/11, the alleged hijackers. And he had set up this, elaborate, product, magic creams, all this stuff. And it's very interesting that we see that same model in sort of the truth movement, patriot movement type of radio networks and stuff out there to this day. And Adnan Kashiogi 100%. Created that, but this guy he runs in a lot of circles with movie stars and musicians. Specifically, he's very obsessed with rock stars and musicians. And the rock band Queen actually wrote a song called Kashiogi's Ship about a party they had on his ship. And I started finding all these connections to these various groups that were operating out of Minnesota, in the Minneapolis, Minnesota, the same area where the Genesis Communications Radio Network operates out of. And all of a sudden, all these groups with, Genesis Intermedia, Genesis this and that start popping up. And I'd already known that Kashiogi had connections with Iran-Contra. And so when I started seeing, like we talked about in the Secret Volume 1, we had Pat Buchanan Jesuit trained, who was involved with the Council on Inter-American Security with Larry Pratt of Gun Owners of America. They were funneling money between the Contras in South America and the CIA and the cocaine trade. And so to find this connection to Khashoggi with those two individuals, Pat Buchanan, who, of course, Alex Jones worked on his campaign in 1996. He's been a regular guest on the Alex Jones show, as well as Larry Pratt. And then to see Khashoggi having all these connections to all these front companies with the name Genesis in them, I started seeing red flags. And then, of course, to find the connection with Michael Aquino that we talk about in the second part of the film, and Michael Aquino's involvement in mind control operations, psychological operations, which is huge bombshell information, and that people will all see that in the film. I don't want to give too much of it away, but essentially, Khashoggi has been providing financing for covert operations that have been conducted by the CIA, the Pentagon, the Israeli Mossad. He's been doing this stuff for years and years and years. If people go and Google his name, I'm trying to remember how you spell it. Adana Kassshiogi is how you spell his name. Adnan Khashoggi. People can go and research that and look up him on his own. I find it highly interesting that Khashoggi had finance through his Genesis Intermedia group. People try to say, "Oh, well, there's no connection to the Genesis Intermedia and Khashoggi and the real Alex Jones GCN." Well, that's just absolutely false, because Khashoggi had funded this guy John Gray, who of course wrote the book "Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus," and had claimed that Khashoggi had ripped him off. But also admitted that he had funded this the book that he had written. Well, Khashoggi had gotten this $250 million injection for Genesis Intermedia from the Jewish financier Carl Icahn, and this was the money that he provided to John Gray to finish his book. John Gray also went on to be a prominent 9/11 truther, appearing on the Alex Jones show, and also gave money to Barry Zwicker to fund his first 9/11 film, which actually was the first film made on 9/11. And later he ended up being an Alex Jones guest as well. So we started to see all of these various connections to Khashoggi, to the 9/11 Truth Movement. And then really one of the bigger ones to me was the fact that we had a connection directly to the 9/11 Commission itself with Keene, and Khashoggi providing money to Keene and the whole 9/11 Commission thing. I mean, it's just an absolutely unbelievable tangled mess.
Yeah.
That when you actually go through and start looking into, you start to see, oh my goodness, they set up this entire conspiracy 9/11 thing as a front to get everybody looking over here and looking over these different factions and groups and arguing over it. But yet the real power and the real people behind it go on untouched, unimpeded, and this has been a theme for these people going back to the Kennedy assassination.
And even before that, as we mentioned before, this is seems to be the MO. In that sense, this is a standard procedure. Unfortunately, it's a mess, as you said. But you have some incredibly interesting connections, obviously, that you detail in the film, and we relay people further to that to find out more about that. What briefly can we talk a little bit about the potential Zionist connection here as well? We have different groups or different interests. We have political agendas. We have theological agendas going on. We've talked a little bit about the Jesuits, the Knights of Malta, and the Vatican, kind of that connection. We do have a Zionist faction in there, involved in everything like this as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that Carl Icahn is a Zionist just because he's Jewish. But what's your take on the Zionist faction in all of this as well, Josh?
Well, I think it's from my research, from what it's shown me, is that Zionism is extension of this priest class structure, and that's what they use to basically further their overarching agenda to implant the people that they want in those biblical lands. It's definitely it's definitely there, especially within the Council for National Policy. We have lots of self-proclaimed Zionists within that group, and people who are constantly professing their allegiance to Israel and the whole thing. But I think it was very interesting to see that Khashoggi has been involved with so many people that have had these Zionist ideologies. But I think that, I think again, that's part of this thing where, you execute a plan or something like 9/11, you blame it on Arabs and the group that you're against over here, and then it furthers whatever ideology that you're behind. So yes, in some cases that ideology for some people is Zionism, for some people it isn't. You have, like we mentioned earlier, you have some people over here that are Freemasons, some people over here that are Jesuits, but I think that the biggest key thing is that all of these groups, no matter what their name is or who they are all colluding together at the highest levels to bring about these operations. And so I think that's why it's important to focus on all of them. And that's why, if I see someone that has a Zionist connection or something, I point that out. If I see somebody that has a Jesuit connection or whatnot, I point that out because it does show that there is no separation really within these groups. They're all working towards the same interests.
Yeah, that's right. And you do have the Christian right in the States, other countries as well, of course, and they have in some cases unquestioned support for Israel. We have a very strong Israeli lobby in the United States, and even historically, we had some really interesting interviews lately about the relationship between both the creation, of course, of Jesus, the Messiah figure, obviously, how this has served a political agenda of Rome, but also involved in this, of course, we have an agenda of Judaism, and the fact that there's been a force here between both sides to fight each other, both from Rome and both from the other side. And again, it can be questioned down the road ad infinitum if these groups now have they joined up? Is there still a battle between them ongoing? No doubt, though, there is a relationship and there is a dance, if you will, that's going on between these groups. And I think that most people today might look at it very just with modern goggles, if I can put it that way. But the fact is that this has very, very ancient roots, as you've been pointing out as well, Josh. And that's one of the most important things. If we want to understand what's happening today, we need to look back into the history and just realize this concept that it's an old game plan that still is it's ongoing, and this is what are the reasons why we're seeing the ramping up for a conflict with Iran today, why they're going into to Syria almost now as well. This is just it's continuing. The plan is unfolding. That's what I say, Josh. How about you?
Well, absolutely, and it is unfolding. And I think that in the modern day, we have so many newer examples now of how these groups who in the past had been, opposing each other, such as the Catholic Church and Freemasonry, and now we're seeing stuff coming out. Well, there was an article that came out a few months ago, and a big scandal where now they're allowing Freemasons to be involved in the Catholic Church and be archbishops and the rest of this stuff. So that really shows a transitional shift, but. Again, we've had, be it Freemasonry or Judaism, all this stuff was absorbed into the Catholic Church so long ago that, the time in which these things were sort of different factions, possibly working against each other has kind of gone in the background. Mm-hmm. And, some of the newer initiates and the people that are coming into the secret society groups or the Freemasons or whatever else in the modern day, they don't have any context for a time in which these groups were separate and working for different goals. So now if someone gets involved in the Freemasons, they may have a knowledge of the history of it being against the Catholic Church and those being opposing forces, not even knowing that in the modern day, a lot of those divisions and factions have, in fact, gone away in exchange for cooperation and working towards mutual interests.
Yep. That's absolutely right. Very good point. Why don't we shift over a little bit and talk about obviously where you're kind of heading towards the end of the DVD and some of the areas where you're leading into next. So are you planning a volume 3 or what's happening next year, Josh?
No, I don't know. It's just going to depend on where the information goes. People kind of asked me if I would make a volume 3 because there's a lot of stuff that I left out in volume 2 and maybe I'll do that eventually. I just don't know yet, but I really am trying to focus on for the next film, but it's kind of up in the air just because we don't have a budget and all that stuff for the next film yet. But I'm really trying to focus on the next film into some of these ancient and buried societies and civilizations that I'm finding now are all over I'm sure they're all over the world, but specifically here in the United States where I live. And one that I've came in fascination with about 7 or 8 years ago was this thing called the Rock Wall, the ancient Rock Wall in a town called Rockwall, Texas, not far from where I grew up my whole life. We find a very, very interesting thing there. This was uncovered about 150 years ago when they built this town, and they found these 2.5-ton garnet stones that had hieroglyphic type writings on them. They found giant skeletons near this thing. It's a 20-mile wall buried under, 30 foot of mud and dirt. You have to dig about 30 or 40 feet down to the bedrock to find this thing. What's interesting is that they found blue shale deposits above the top of the wall, meaning this thing had been built before the Pleistocene era. They found shark's teeth embedded in the outside of this thing. There's been paleomagnetic surveys that have been done where the people who have found information on this wall have not wanted their findings to be put out there until after their death. We have things such as the wall being a masonry wall that is held together with something called a geopolymer, where multiple different types of crystals have been brought together and used to create this wall. And some of the estimates that have been done on the age of this have gone anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000, 500,000 years old, 50 million years old. And so there's a lot of stuff that surrounding that, a lot more stuff that I'm finding in my research. In fact, I found another what appears to be another wall that was reported by the New York Times in the 1920s, about 150 miles from Rockwall. I'm planning to go get down there at some point. That they said was actually thicker than the Great Wall of China. Nothing has been reported on that in about 60 years. But there's a lot of things that tie in with the secret rite at the end of the film, because Congressman Ralph Hall, who's a Council for National Policy member, was actually seen in the middle of the night leaving the old Rockwall courthouse with one of these big garnet stones. And as soon as people in the town of Rockwall started asking questions about this, why does this, and by the way, Ralph Hall absolutely is a Freemason. I do have that confirmed. And it's interesting because the lodge that he's belonged to, if you go to this East Fork Masonic Lodge in Rockwall, Texas, if you go to their website, they actually have a little representation of the wall at the top of the website, indicating that, yes, they are aware that these were some ancient stonemasons, some of their ancient brethren who built this, even though the scientific community says, oh, it's a natural formation, but we've never found another one like it anywhere on Earth. So it's highly interesting, and his office being on top of one of these ancient temple rooms that they've identified. Reports were coming out of the Rockwall newspaper in the latter part of the 19th century about, again, giant skeletons being found. Those there are pictures of those giant skeletons that were found around there. They went to universities and then disappeared. There's just all kinds of evidence and stuff that's leaning towards this possibly being the ancient and mysterious land of Aslan that was created by Quetzalcoatl. There's been all kinds of reports of people like channelers like Ashiana Dean have said that it was a storehouse for ancient alien technology after the fall of Atlantis. There's just so many things, and I've just become intrigued with it over the past 7 or 8 years, and I've met with a lot of the people who have done digs in the past on this thing, and I'm trying to create a film to get up interest in this rock wall so that possibly we can fund another archaeology dig in the future to try and come up with some information and some artifacts on this thing, because Henry, it appears that there is ancient history that brings into question everything we've been told by science and religion and everything else, just being buried and forgotten about intentionally underneath us everywhere. And I just really feel compelled to try and bring that out as best I can.
Well, that's right. I mean, the work of Michael Cremo, some other people as well, Forbidden Archaeology, the OOP arts, the out-of-place artifacts, fascinating stuff. And I mean, the United States is, in some cases, not the place you think about when you think about, massive monuments and things. And of course, we know that there's a tradition of Native Americans in America, but possibly we have this, as you mentioned before, the giant connection, if you will, to the United States, and there's some incredibly interesting stuff. There's even another website, for instance, a while back stumbled over called ancientcanalbuilders.com that shows these amazing structures all over the United States in terms of huge canals showing old port cities today underwater, and it shows how someone has done a massive effort to kind of terraform specifically the east coast of the United States. But there's just so much more in the U.S. Is it? Have you heard of anything similar in Texas, or let's say that if you were to extend your search for this a little bit, is it something otherwise close by that you've heard as well that we can talk a little bit about?
Oh, absolutely. There's actually a Phoenician fortress and a furnace that's been found in Oklahoma, which is a state just north of where I'm at. It's about an hour and a half drive. Actually, it's about an hour from here. And there was a researcher who had found this. The Phoenicians allegedly came into the United States many years ago through waterways, and there's actually a tribe of Indians up in Oklahoma who are the only tribe of Native Americans who actually have their own written language. And this written language appears to be a form of the phonetic alphabet. And so we're now starting to see these structures as in this Phoenician fortress / furnace, where you see these stones that are comprised of cells. They have like a 4-panel square with stones in the middle of them, and then they're stacked up one on top of each other. So this has been referred to as a furnace and a fortress. Oftentimes, when they refer to furnaces in ancient texts, like the fiery furnace, we know that oftentimes they're talking about stargates. So I've been totally intrigued by that, and that's only about an hour and 20-minute drive from where I'm at. So I definitely want to go out and try to get some footage of that. I do have actually some pictures. There was an archaeologist who went out and went out and had actually discovered this, and he brought some stones to show us, and I got some pictures and stuff of that. I hope to go out and see more of that. Also, places like Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, which supposedly you could reach deeper parts of 20 or 30 years ago that they've now shut off, which allegedly have entrances into inner Earth and the rest of this stuff. So that's what I'm looking at now. Is I'm kind of seeing a possible tie-in with some of these ancient structures within the United States. Then the reason they're being buried is because it's a possibility they may contain caverns and different things like that may go into the Earth itself. So I'm definitely going to do my best if funding permits and we get the support that we need to be able to get that film out and to go explore this stuff. It's going to be a different type of film than what I've made before, because it's going to consist of just actual footage and things like that, not news clips and stuff of that nature. So I'm really trying to push the boundaries, Hendrik, as far as looking both at the political structure and the secret society structure of these things, but also the things that are being intently buried and not allowed to be brought to the forefront because they contain some information that, again, challenges the power structure. And I think that's the point of all of this, really.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's what's so really interesting about all this, that this might be where things are heading. There has been a kind of a reluctancy from certain portions as well of the alternative community that it's kind of okay for a while. You can look and talk about UFOs, but really we know that it's kind of bullshit. And if for whatever reason we would like to criticize you for anything, we could always just say that, hey, you're looking at UFOs, buddy. So, you're kind of disqualified already right there. There's certain things that seem to be kind of off limit as well. But, what you've been pointing at, which is very interesting, is that there is a kind of an ongoing, if you will, cover up attempt almost in that sense. No, don't look at that. That's not okay. But look over here. Look at all this stuff, right? So.
It does seem that way. It does. I mean, everywhere I turn it, I mean, I can remember some of these subjects, not looking into some of these subjects in the past, because I had listened to people who said, don't look into the Sumerian stuff, or don't look into any of this, secret society, because it's a distraction. Focus on bankers and all the rest of this. And you start to come to find out, wait a minute, when you see these connections to, people in the truth movement in alternative media, to the Knights of Malta or the Jesuits or whatever it may be, it starts to paint this picture where you say, okay, well, this is exactly why they never wanted me to look into this. Because they're afraid I'm going to find out this whole other end of connections that there are. And there is so much more to this picture and this worldview of the conspiracy than what the alternative media has been allowed to let out up to this point. And I think that's what's great about Red Ice Radio, is that regardless of whether or not you agree or disagree with all the guests that come on the show, I think that you have an opportunity here to get access to so many more viewpoints than you do on a lot of the other outlets there. And I think that's why people need to continue to support what you're doing here, Henrik, is because there's very few outlets that allow every single viewpoint pretty much to be put out there. And I think that's what's great about what you do here is you allow that to happen. And so I thank you for that.
Well, same to you. I mean, you allow that to happen as well. And that's why we like to go all over the place and an effort to try to find the answers. And because I personally believe as well that there is a bigger story here. There is a great mystery of mankind, but it seems to much of this is we're being entrapped again in a certain set of accepted beliefs, basically, that this is okay to look at, but not this area. And I couldn't care less. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last time we had you on as well, but it's like, that doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't matter. I'm not here to get recognition either from the mainstream, which seems to be the case in some cases when it comes to even alternative media, that they're trying their best and hardest to try to, like the pinnacle point is still if you can make it onto CNN or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, well, I don't give a crap about that. This is about just finding the answers, letting the answers lead us where it may, or the information lead us where it may. Josh.
Absolutely. I mean, I just never have understood that myself. Why are we trying to be against the mainstream, trying to placate ourselves and what we talk about, what we do to the mainstream? Obviously, the mainstream of whether it may be media outlets or books or movies or whatever else has obviously proven itself to be a faction and a control arm of the power structure itself. So that to me is why there was a necessity and a need for a quote unquote alternative media to come up with. But as you said, unfortunately, a lot of those people, just as a comfort zone thing, have fallen back into this same. I'd be honest with you, Henrik. I see lately more fear and paranoia and just frankly bullshit from the alternative media, almost more than you see from the mainstream media these days. I mean, it's absolutely mind blowing to me to see how much fear mongering and scaremongering is going on within the alternative media and doomsaying and the rest of this stuff. And look, you're never going to be able to think rationally or act rationally in a situation to save your life if you are acting on the basis of fear. You're just going to be a mess. You're going to be flying all over the place. And I think that's what inherently happens to a lot of people when they first wake up to this information is they're flying off the handle. They want to know whose ass they got to kick. Who do they have to go after to stop this? Because they're just operating on an emotional basis. But when you allow your rational mind to come in and you start looking at and actually having some discernment about this stuff, you start to realize that some of the things that you were made to be in fear about are the fear itself is distracting you from being focused on things that you may actually have the ability to change. And I think that's been a very, very distinct operation is to keep us from actually engaging in actually changing things. They keep us paralyzed with fear and paranoia, and that's a very dangerous thing.
Well, it's a kind of a double standard in many cases in all this as well. I don't want to downplay something specifically that I don't have all the facts about, but if we look at some of the situations pertaining to the Gulf oil spill, for instance, or even Fukushima, I'm not saying that things aren't bad, but I'm saying that it has been an incredibly hysterical, in some cases, reaction to some of these things, like we are all going to die kind of thing, and it's all over right now. We're still here, and again, I'm not saying that things are great there and don't worry about it kind of thing, but I see what you're saying there. It's a hysteria involving around that, and in some cases, this can come from people who are, can have an approach that all this, nonsense about 2012 and doomsday, that's all garbage. But let's focus on this that's happening right here. That's our doomsday. It's within the same kind of paradigm, if you know what I mean, and hence a double standard to me, Josh.
I couldn't agree with you more, Henrik. I'm so glad you said that. I mean, I run into that sometimes during my radio show and during my research, and it's so hard to get across to people the idea that yes, I am concerned or you're concerned about this event or that event, Fukushima or the oil spill. And yes, we are concerned. And yes, those things need to be exposed. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there just becomes all of this. I mean, I can't believe all the stuff that I heard. I've heard everything possible about both of those events, and I know you have as well, Henrik. I mean, I've heard everything from, aliens caused the oil spill in the Gulf to, Israeli Mossad submarines launched missiles at Fukushima. I mean, there's just this constant thing of paranoia and fear and minimizing our power and our energy and our ability to be able to effectively try and disseminate the facts from the fiction. And I think that that's exactly what they do by keeping people in this frozen state of fear, is they keep that mind frozen, and then you're not allowing people to actually discern for themselves what's going on. And both the alternative media and the mainstream media have done a fantastic job of that as of late.
Yeah, it's true. And I remember even hearing a while back that the whole Gulf was going to explode. They were drilling into some kind of batholith point there, and the whole freaking thing was just going to blow up, and but it pries on the audience in a sense, and it keeps on coming back for more. In that fear state, there's actually an addiction as well, with pertaining to the adrenaline that's produced when you listen to it. There's a lot more to it than that, and I'm not saying in every aspect this is a detailed plan, but that's certainly one of the side effects in all this.
Well, it is, and that's exactly what, it is like a drug. People get addicted to the fight or flight, sort of thing that initiates in all of us, and then people learn to manipulate that. The fact of the matter is that a rational person who is operating on all the best facts that they can come up with is going to be much more effective than someone who's running around like a chicken with her head cut off, scared and saying the sky is falling. And again,
true.
I think that is the ultimate point in all this, Henrik, is they don't want us to be researchers and people who are finding the truth on our own and finding it unfiltered. They want to make sure there are all these gatekeepers and all these things there that will muddy the water for you. So they're certainly not making it easy on the researcher, but folks, nothing in life is ever easy. But my thing is that all my years of doing this, I've been on air for almost 5 years now, and my life has changed 100% since I started actually looking at things on my own and researching on my own and finding my own truth, and not just following what other people have said to me. And yeah, it's been tough, like you mentioned earlier, having to come to grips with people that you thought were heroes and understand that they're not your heroes and not on your side. That's a very tough thing, but
a very healthy
deal
thing
with that
as well. It's very healthy.
It's very healthy because then you start to realize, that okay, they pull one over on me. I fell into this trap again, but I'm not going to allow that to happen. It's okay to admit that you've been duped. It's okay to admit that you bought into, this truther's information or this researcher's information. It's okay. Nobody's going to look down on you or think bad about you because you bought a lie. I bought a lie too. We all have at some point. But the real fact of the matter is are you going to move on from that? Are you going to continue to push forward your own knowledge and your own enlightenment and try to do the best to share that with other people as well? And I think for me, Henrik, that's become a real focus of all my work.
Absolutely. I mean, this is about continuing the search in that sense, and don't expect to have the whole picture yet, and have some humility in the attitude towards both the information, but also in the way we present or claim to have all the answers or all the truth, and just keep more of an open mind and just share what we have, obviously, and don't hold anything back in that sense, but don't claim that this is the ultimate truth and this is what everyone else should think as well, because that's horrible.
I don't have all the answers, and nobody out there does, but I think the most important thing is that if all of us individually are focusing on our own part in this and our own work in this, that collectively we can gain a lot of insight and gain a lot of ground by just being our own individuals and continuing to push and look into this stuff. I mean, I think that that's exactly what they don't want. They want us in factions because we're easily controlled. They want us in groups. They want us in categories. And I think when you have a bunch of sovereign individuals out there who are just interested in the information or not inclining themselves towards this group or that group or anything else, I think that's a much more dangerous proposition to the power structure, because then, you're not relegated to some fringe or some area where you're more easily controlled.
That's right. We'll tread easy forward, see what happens, feet on the ground and head in the sky, as to say. Excellent to talk to you again, Josh. Always good to have you on again. Great job on the DVD. And I once more want to mention the website, theglobalreality.com. Head on over there. Take a look at the options that Josh has for you in terms of the DVDs. I highly recommend that you take a look at it and then determine for yourself what you think and what to make of all the information presented. Josh, you also have a radio show, of course, going that people can tune into. You have all the other information on the site as well. But if there's something else you'd like to mention, I'll leave the last couple of minutes here open for you, if so, Josh.
Well, thanks, Henrik. I appreciate that. And theglobalreality.com is my website. It's theglobalreality.com. And up there, people find all kinds of stuff. We have a book section up there that has some audio books that are taken from readings I've done from stuff like William Bramley's The Gods of Eden and some various other books. We've got all my other documentary films and stuff up there. But under the Buy SR2 tab is where people go and get the DVDs and Blu-rays of the Sea Ride Volume 2. And if there's people out there that want to be contributors financially to some of the next projects and next films, these all require money, and I don't have any outside source funding other than the people that listen and enjoy my work. So that's where they can support my work as well at the website, Henrik. And again, I just appreciate Red Ice Radio. I appreciate what you do, and this format of being able to come up here and have an open conversation about all of this stuff is very vitally important. So I hope people continue to support your work and what you do, Henrik. And again, just thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and great. Have a blast for your next project, of course. Sounds like a lot of fun, and good luck on the Rockwall project. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Much more coming your way soon. Keep an eye on the website for all the latest. Thank you for listening, and thank you for subscribing. This is Henrik. Have a great day wherever you are, and take good care.